I was halfway through my fourth energy drink when my assistant Claire barged into my office without knocking. Classic Claire. Then charity bike ride is tomorrow, Alexa. Your cycling gear just arrived. She dropped a package wrapped in premium tissue paper on my desk, disrupting the perfect symmetry of my spreadsheets and coffee mug. "And cancel it," I said, not looking up from my laptop where quarterly projections glowed accusingly. "Unta Henderson merger needs some promise the board. It's the company's biggest PR move this quarter." Claire's voice had that steel edge I paid her exceptionally well for. "Unsure speech about community engagement is already on the press release." My head throbbed with the familiar pain of too much caffeine and too little sleep. Outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, Reno's skyline sparkled like a poor man's Vegas, mocking my exhaustion. 36 years old, and I'd already forgotten what it felt like to not be tired. "Fine," I conceded, running my fingers through my blonde hair. 3 hours maximum. I'll smile for the cameras, pedal a symbolic mile, then I'm back for the conference call with Tokyo. The truth was darker than simple corporate obligation. After David leaked those board emails last month, I needed public goodwill more than oxygen. One charity event wouldn't fix the Tice Queen of Nevada business headlines, but it was a start. That night in my penthouse, rain pelted against the windows with surprising fury. The weather forecast had promised clear skies for tomorrow's ride. I poured another bourbon, the amber liquid catching the lightning that briefly illuminated my empty home. The crystal glass clinked against my teeth as I took a too large swallow. On my coffee table sat the divorce papers, still unsigned after 8 months. Jonathan hadn't fought for custody of our dog, our friends, or me. Just walked away with his 20-something yoga instructor and half my heart. The bike gear Claire had brought was professional grade, still smelling of new synthetic fabric and ambition. I ran my fingertips over the company logo emblazoned across the chest. Johnson Financial Services, building tomorrow together. What complete and utter bullshit. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Alexa Johnson," I answered, executive voice firmly in place despite the bourbon. "Ins Johnson?" A woman's voice, warm but uncertain. "This is Maggie Foster from the Charity Committee. Just confirming tomorrow's route. It's the advanced trail now, after the rain. Still good for you?" "Advanced? I thought this was ceremonial." My voice sharpened like a blade. "We need the figureheads to actually finish, for the donations," she explained, something in her tone challenging me. "But we can certainly move you to the beginner's path if that's more your speed." The implication stung. "And advanced is fine," I replied coolly. "I excel at everything I attempt, Ms. Foster." Her laugh was unexpected, genuine, not the calculated chuckle of boardroom politics. "We'll see, city girl. 5 a.m., sharp." The line went dead before I could respond. I scrolled through my emails to find the event details. Maggie Foster, Rural Development Coordinator. The photo showed a brunette with striking blue eyes and a smile that seemed impossible to fake. The next morning arrived with vengeful brightness. My head pounded as I dragged myself to the starting line, surrounded by disgustingly cheerful people in matching spandex. The air smelled of wet earth and coffee from nearby vendors. That's when I saw her. Maggie Foster, adjusting someone's helmet with careful hands, laughing at something they said. Her presence was magnetic, authentic in a way that made my skin prickle with something between envy and attraction. She spotted me and waved, jogging over. "Ms. Johnson, you made it!" Her eyes were even bluer in person, her handshake surprisingly firm. And I said I would. I noticed calluses on her palm against my manicured fingers. "And let's get this over with." The trail was slick with mud, challenging even for experienced riders. I pushed harder, refusing to show weakness, my breath coming in ragged gasps as we climbed higher into the foothills. Sweat trickled down my spine, mixing with the occasional raindrop that broke through the tree canopy. I never saw the fallen branch until my front wheel hit it. The world tilted dramatically, sky and earth trading places. There was a moment of weightlessness, then pain exploded through my shoulder as I hit the ground. The last thing I remember was Maggie's face appearing above mine, those blue eyes wide with concern, her voice solid and sure. "And I've got you. Stay with me, Alexa." I didn't know then that the crash would be the easiest part of what was coming, or that the woman kneeling in the mud beside me would completely dismantle the life I'd spent decades building. I woke to the smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. A dull ache pulsed through my left shoulder, and my head felt like it had been split open with an axe. The fluorescent lights above were mercilessly bright. "C's awake?" someone whispered. That warm voice again. "Maggie." I tried to sit up, immediately regretting it as pain shot through my collarbone. "Easy there, Tiger." Gentle hands eased me back down. "You've got a mild concussion and a dislocated shoulder. Doctor says you'll live, though your pride might take longer to recover." I blinked until her face came into focus. She'd changed out of her cycling gear into jeans and a faded blue flannel shirt that somehow made her eyes even more striking. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, wisps of brown framing her face. "In the event," my voice cracked. "Successfully completed. Your company's PR team already released a statement about your heroic attempt despite treacherous conditions." Maggie's smile had a teasing edge. "They're spinning quite the tale of corporate bravery." A doctor strode in, clipboard in hand. He glanced between us, his expression warming. "Ah, good to see you awake, Ms. Johnson. Your fiancé has been quite worried." "My what now?" Before I could correct him, Maggie took my hand, her thumb stroking across my knuckles in a gesture so intimate it stunned me into silence. "Just relieved she's okay, doctor." Her voice was honey smooth, no hint of the lie she was telling. The doctor nodded approvingly. "Well, head trauma can be tricky. We'll need to keep her under observation overnight. Any previous medical conditions we should know about?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Maggie squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Since she's allergic to penicillin," Maggie answered for me. "And she sometimes gets panic attacks in hospitals. Family history of being denied care, you know?" The doctor's expression shifted subtly. "I see. Don't worry, we'll take extra good care of her. Partner rights are fully respected here." After he left, I pulled my hand away. What the hell was that about? Maggie glanced toward the door before leaning closer. "Tis hospital has a reputation. Dr. Marshall is great, but some staff have been known to deprioritize certain patients. Single women especially get the runaround with pain management and discharge timing." "So you decided we're engaged?" I hissed. It was a split-second decision when they asked our relationship at check-in. She looked almost embarrassed. "Once you were unconscious, and they were being difficult about me accompanying you." I closed my eyes, trying to process this absurdity through the fog of pain medication. "But my assistant will straighten this out. Where's my phone?" Ends smashed in the fall. "I called your office from my phone. Claire's handling the Henderson merger emergency." "Damn it, the merger." I tried to sit up again and groaned. "Seriously, you need to rest." Maggie poured a cup of water and held it to my lips. "A bike crash was bad enough without you giving yourself an aneurysm over spreadsheets." Her proximity was disconcerting, the faint scent of pine and something floral, the steady certainty of her movements. I wasn't used to being cared for. Not like this, not by a stranger. "Why are you still here? The event's over. PR mission accomplished." My voice was sharper than intended. "And because I'm apparently a terrible fiancé if I abandon you in the hospital." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Plus, I feel responsible." I pushed for the advanced trail. A nurse bustled in, administering more pain medication. The edges of the room began to soften. "Where will you stay tonight?" I asked Maggie, my defenses lowering with the drug's effect. "There's a motel down the street." "Oh no," I interrupted, surprising myself. "That's ridiculous. My penthouse has 3 guest rooms. You should stay there." And couldn't impose. "And you've already seen me unconscious, bloody, and now drugged. Might as well complete the humiliation tour." The medication was making me honest. Besides, what if I need my fiancé during the night? Maggie's laugh was genuine, crinkling the corners of those impossibly blue eyes. "Well, when you put it that way." The next morning, after discharge paperwork and prescriptions, we stepped into the elevator of my building. The penthouse button glowed as Maggie pressed it, her eyes widening slightly. "Fair warning," I said as the doors closed. "And I haven't had a guest in, I don't remember how long." The elevator ascended swiftly, my stomach dropping in a way that had nothing to do with the motion. Something about Maggie's presence in my carefully controlled world felt dangerous, Yet when we reached my door and I fumbled one-handed with the keys, she steadied me with a touch to my waist, and before I could overthink it, I turned and pressed a brief impulsive kiss to her cheek. "Thank you," I whispered, "for not leaving me on that trail." The surprise in her eyes mirrored my own at the gesture. What was I doing? I didn't know this woman. I didn't kiss people. I certainly didn't bring strangers to my home. But as the door swung open to my pristine, empty penthouse, I realized I didn't want to be alone with the pain and the silence. Not tonight. 2 days after the bike accident, Maggie was still in my penthouse. I told myself it was because the doctor advised against me being alone with a concussion. The truth was more complicated. "Son, you have 17 nearly identical gray suits," Maggie observed, leaning against my closet doorway as I struggled one-handed to dress for work. "My first meeting back after the accident. Don't you ever get bored?" "Insistency projects authority," I replied, wincing as I attempted to button my blouse. "Whoa, damn it." Without asking, Maggie stepped forward and efficiently fastened the remaining buttons. Her fingers worked quickly, professional, though I couldn't help noticing calluses on her fingertips, so different from my manicured hands. "And the board expects me back," I explained, though she hadn't questioned my rapid return to work. "Henderson is still circling, looking for weakness." "Henderson?" She straightened my collar, her hands lingering a moment too long. "Rival financial firm. Been trying to acquire us for months." I stepped back, breaking the strange tension between us. "And Claire will pick you up at 3 for the tour." Maggie nodded. I'd impulsively invited her to see my company headquarters, though I couldn't explain why, even to myself. At the office, Claire raised an eyebrow as I briefed her on escorting Maggie later. "And a charity bike ride woman? You've never given anyone a personal tour." Her tone was carefully neutral, but I knew Claire too well. "She helped me after the crash. It's professional courtesy." Claire's silence spoke volumes. The merger meeting was brutal. Henderson's representatives scented blood in the water. My absence had rattled investors. I stood my ground, never hinting at the throbbing pain in my shoulder. "Johnson Financial isn't interested in acquisition. Our clients value our independent approach." When Henderson's CEO smiled thinly and mentioned certain leaked emails suggesting board instability, I felt the room temperature drop. The bastards were trying to use David's betrayal against me. By the time Maggie arrived with Claire, I was exhausted but victorious. The meeting hadn't ended in our favor, but I'd bought time. I watched through my glass office wall as Maggie entered the executive floor. She wore simple dark jeans and a forest green blouse, casual compared to the power suits surrounding her, yet somehow commanding in her authenticity. Heads turned as Claire led her through the maze of desks. "So, this is your world," Maggie said when she entered my office, taking in the minimalist design, the city view, the awards lining one wall. "And part of it," I replied, suddenly seeing it through her eyes. "Cold, perhaps. Sterile." The tour proceeded efficiently. Maggie asked surprisingly insightful questions about our rural development programs, clearly in her element discussing community investment. I found myself explaining decisions I rarely justified to anyone. In the executive dining room, conversation flowed easily until Henderson himself appeared beside our table. "On my Alexa." He nodded, his eyes calculating as they shifted to Maggie. "And this is..." Something protective flared in me. "Maggie Foster, Rural Development Coordinator for the Silver State Initiative." His handshake lingered on Maggie's hand. "Charming. You know, Ms. Foster, Johnson Financial's rural programs are quite limited. Our firm has much more substantial resources." Maggie smiled politely but extracted her hand. "A fine substance isn't always about resources, Mr. Henderson. Sometimes it's about genuine commitment." After he left, I couldn't contain a laugh. He just offended a billionaire without him even realizing it. Maggie shrugged. "I grew like that, don't scare me. I grew up with cattle barons trying to buy my family's water rights." Later that evening, Maggie packed her small bag. Time I headed home. "You're clearly recovered enough to terrify boardrooms again." An unexpected pang hit me. What if I'm not? The words slipped out before I could stop them. She tilted her head. "Are you asking me to stay longer?" I was saved from answering by my phone ringing. my property manager in the countryside, reporting storm damage at the vacation home I never visited. And I should drive up there. I sighed after hanging up. It's been neglected too long. Where is it? Maggie asked. Silver Creek. About an hour from here. Her eyes widened. That's 15 minutes from my place? That's how, the following Friday, I found myself driving into rural Nevada with Maggie beside me, weekend bags in the trunk of my Audi. I told myself it was practical. She knew the area, could recommend contractors. The truth was, I wasn't ready for her to disappear from my life. My country house was exactly as I remembered, a beautiful shell containing nothing of me. Maggie walked through the rooms, trailing her fingers over dusty surfaces. It's lovely, but soulless, I supplied. And I was going to say unlived in. That evening, Maggie insisted we visit her home. The small farmhouse couldn't have been more different from my properties. Mismatched furniture, walls covered with photos, books stacked everywhere. It felt alive. When the power went out during a sudden storm, Maggie built a fire with practiced ease. We huddled under blankets, sharing stories as rain lashed the windows. Her childhood on the struggling farm, my calculated climb through male-dominated finance. Why finance? She asked, firelight dancing across her face. Oh, you could run anything. 1 and 2 prove I could, I admitted. But my father said women lack the killer instinct for high finance. Maggie's eyes held mine. And do you have killer instinct? When necessary. Her hand found mine in the darkness. Yet here you are, hiding out with a country girl instead of conquering Wall Street. I'm not hiding, I whispered, though perhaps I was. When Maggie leaned forward and kissed me, it felt inevitable. Her lips were soft, tasting of the wine we'd been sharing. I'd kissed her cheek days ago out of gratitude, but this was something entirely different, something I hadn't allowed myself in longer than I could remember. When we broke apart, both breathing heavily, thunder crashed outside as if punctuating the moment. It shouldn't have, Maggie began. I silenced her with another kiss, deeper this time, years of carefully maintained control crumbling like the ash in the fireplace beside us. Monday morning hit like a sledgehammer. I'd spent the entire weekend with Maggie, returning to Reno late Sunday night, my mind still half lost in that firelit moment. The Henderson deal is back on the table, Claire announced, dropping a stack of folders on my desk. And you have 14 missed calls from the PR team. And PR? About what? Claire's expression was carefully neutral as she placed her tablet in front of me. On screen was a financial blog with the headline, Johnson Financial CEO's Secret Engagement, Corporate Strategy, or Cover-Up? Below it, a photo of Maggie helping me into my car outside the hospital, my hand in hers clearly visible. The article speculated wildly about my fiancé, and the timing so close to the Henderson acquisition attempt. What the hell is this? I scrolled through the article, blood rushing in my ears. Gets worse. Claire swiped to another site. Henderson's media allies are suggesting you've been hiding your relationship to manipulate stock prices before the merger. I slammed the tablet down, and it was a misunderstanding at the hospital. We're not engaged. Claire's eyebrow arched. But you did spend the weekend with her. It's not. I stopped myself. What exactly wasn't it? I called Maggie immediately, but the call went to voicemail. I was crafting a text when my office door burst open. Henderson himself strolled in, uninvited. Alexa, darling. We need to talk about your engagement announcement. There is no engagement, I said through gritted teeth. Henderson's smile was all teeth. And timing is curious. Right as our merger talks intensify, you suddenly have a fiancé no one's ever heard of. Is it coincidence she's connected to rural development, the very sector your board is considering divesting? My blood ran cold. How did he know about the confidential board discussions? After forcing Henderson out of my office, I spent hours in damage control. By evening, I'd missed 6 more calls from Maggie. When I finally had a moment to return them, a text came through from her. My brother and sister just showed up at my door. They saw the articles, said they're staying until they meet my sophisticated city fiancé. Help? I called immediately. Maggie, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, she cut in, her voice low. But they won't believe me that it was just a hospital mix-up. My sister thinks I've been hiding you because I'm ashamed of them. I heard voices in the background, then Maggie saying, "Yes, that's her now." "What did you tell them?" I asked. A pause. "Tet, we're keeping it quiet because of your high-profile position. That the press wasn't supposed to find out." Her voice dropped further. "When Sarah's staying through the weekend, would you consider playing along?" I finished, surprised at my lack of hesitation. "I'll be there Friday night." The board meeting Wednesday was tense. David, my former confidant and current thorn in my side, openly questioned my judgment and transparency. The engagement rumors had rattled investor confidence, and Henderson was capitalizing on it. "The rural development portfolio is underperforming," David argued. "Henderson's offer includes maintaining those programs at current levels while increasing shareholder value." "TO's programs aren't about immediate returns," I countered. "Weren't there long-term investments in communities that happened to include your secret fiancé's hometown?" David's smile was vicious. The meeting ended with a deadline, 2 weeks to show the rural portfolio's viability or face a board vote on the Henderson merger. Thursday night, I found myself packing for another weekend in the countryside, this time with the bizarre task of pretending to be engaged to a woman I'd kissed only once. When I arrived at Maggie's farmhouse Friday evening, I was greeted by a tall man with Maggie's same blue eyes, her brother James, and a petite woman with a skeptical expression. Sarah, her sister. "So you're the mysterious city slicker who swept our Maggie off her feet," James said, his handshake firm but not quite friendly. "Don't mind him," Sarah interjected. "We're just surprised Maggie kept you secret for... How long has it been?" Before I could fumble an answer, Maggie appeared in the doorway. "Alexa!" The relief in her voice was palpable. She crossed to me, rising on tiptoes to kiss my cheek. "I'm so glad you made it." The warmth in her eyes wasn't entirely acting, and something fluttered in my chest. Over dinner, I fielded questions about my background, my company, and how we'd met, sticking close to the truth about the charity event, omitting the hospital misunderstanding. "And when's the wedding?" Sarah asked innocently. Maggie choked on her wine. "We're taking our time," I answered smoothly. "With my company facing a potential hostile takeover, it hasn't seemed like the right moment." Later, while helping with dishes, James cornered me in the kitchen. "Maggie's been hurt before," he said quietly. "On city people who think dating a country girl is a charming diversion until reality sets in." I met his gaze steadily. "That's not what this is." The strange part was, I meant it. That night, sharing Maggie's bed, the guest room conveniently under renovation, we lay awake whispering in the darkness. "So we're maintaining this charade until after your merger situation resolves?" Maggie asked, her body carefully not touching mine despite the limited space. "Yes," I agreed, then added, "and until your siblings leave." "And then?" I stared at the ceiling, considering the impossible complications, the press, the board, Henderson's threats. "And then we figure out what's real," I whispered, reaching for her hand under the covers. The next 2 weeks settled into a strange dual reality. Weekdays in Reno, I battled Henderson's increasingly aggressive takeover attempts while deflecting press questions about my relationship. Weekends in Silver Creek, I played the role of devoted fiancé to Maggie, whose siblings had extended their stay and to help with wedding plans. "Oh, you're getting quite good at this," Maggie whispered as we waved goodbye to her siblings after Sunday brunch. They'd finally announced their departure for the following weekend. "And at what?" I asked, my arm comfortable around her waist. "Pretending to be in love with me." The words hit like a cold shower. Was I pretending? The line had blurred dangerously. Monday morning, I arrived at my office to find Claire waiting with an unusual request. "The Henderson PR team has invited you to their charity gala. Tonight?" I frowned. "Obviously a trap." "Obviously," Claire agreed. "But refusing looks suspicious, especially with those engagement rumors still circulating." That evening found me in a sleek black dress at Henderson's gala, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. When Maggie appeared beside me, I nearly dropped my champagne. "What are you doing here?" I hissed. She wore a simple emerald dress that made her eyes impossibly blue. "Aunt Claire called. Said you might need backup. I had a meeting in the city today anyway." Before I could respond, Henderson materialized, all false charm. "Lexa! And this must be the mysterious fiancé. Delighted to finally meet you properly, Miss Foster." Maggie shook his hand with perfect poise. "Likewise. Though I've heard so much about your negotiation tactics, I feel I already know you." Henderson's smile tightened. I hope Alexa hasn't painted me as the villain." "Not at all," Maggie replied coolly. "She's far too professional for that." Throughout the evening, Maggie seamlessly navigated the corporate social waters, charming investors while subtly defending my rural development initiatives. When Henderson tried to corner her alone, she deflected masterfully, staying by my side. "Where did you learn to handle people like that?" I asked as we shared a dance, maintaining our cover. Maggie smiled. "You forget, I negotiate with stubborn ranchers and government officials daily. Corporate sharks aren't so different." Her hand was warm against mine, our bodies moving in surprising harmony. I found myself forgetting we were supposed to be acting. The following weekend, I invited Maggie to my country house for a change. After her siblings finally departed, she agreed to come riding with me on the property's neglected trails. "Own, you're not half bad for a city girl," she teased as I managed to keep my seat on the gentle mare she'd selected for me. The autumn day was perfect, golden light filtering through trees just beginning to turn, the air crisp with the promise of colder weather. For hours we explored forgotten corners of the property, Maggie pointing out native plants and sharing her vision for sustainable land management. We stopped for lunch by a small brook, spreading a blanket over fallen leaves. I'd packed an embarrassingly elaborate picnic, complete with wine. "'Tis is quite the spread," Maggie said, raising an eyebrow. "Claire ordered it," I admitted. "I told her we were having a picnic and..." She assumed it was part of the fiancé charade. Maggie's expression was unreadable. I poured wine into plastic cups. "Is that what this is?" Maggie accepted her cup, fingers brushing mine. "And, you tell me, Alexa, the gala's over. My siblings are gone. Henderson's still circling, but he doesn't need a demonstration today." The question hung between us, autumn sunlight catching in her hair. Instead of answering, I leaned forward and kissed her, tasting wine and something uniquely Maggie. Her hand came up to cup my cheek, deepening the kiss until we were both breathless. "Does that answer your question?" I whispered against her lips. That night, back at the farmhouse, the storm that had threatened all day finally broke. Rain lashed against the windows as we moved from tentative kisses to something more urgent. Maggie's hands traced patterns on my skin that made coherent thought impossible. "Are you sure?" she whispered, hovering above me. In answer, I pulled her down, surrendering to the desire I'd been fighting since that first kiss by the fire. Lightning illuminated the room in brief flashes, revealing glimpses of Maggie's face as she moved against me. In the thunder's echo, I stopped pretending this was anything but what I truly wanted. Hours later, wrapped in tangled sheets, Maggie traced lazy circles on my shoulder. "What happens when you go back to Reno? When the Henderson situation resolves one way or another?" I stared at the ceiling, reality intruding on our bubble. I don't know. This is complicated. Because I'm a woman? Or because I'm not corporate material? And because I don't do relationships, I admitted. And my marriage failed spectacularly. Work has been safer. Maggie propped herself up on one elbow. "Nothing safe about what we just did?" Her smile was contagious, and I found myself laughing despite the uncertainty. For the first time in years, I wasn't plotting 3 moves ahead. I was simply here, with her, watching lightning illuminate the sky over Silver Creek. Neither of us could have predicted how quickly the storm would follow us back to the city. The Monday morning board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. I arrived at 7:30, determined to be overprepared for Henderson's latest offensive. What I hadn't prepared for was finding David, my former ally, waiting in my office. "We need to talk," he said, sliding a tablet across my desk. The screen showed a financial news site with the headline, "Johnson Financial CEO's Rural Romance, Strategic Diversion or Genuine Conflict of Interest?" Below was a photo of Maggie and me at our weekend picnic, clearly not acting for anyone's benefit. The article detailed our engagement, then questioned whether my relationship with a rural development coordinator had influenced company investment decisions. Where did they get this? I demanded. David's expression was almost pitying. Henderson has someone watching you. Has for weeks. But that's not the worst part. He brought up internal company emails, confidential board communications discussing the rural investment portfolio, including messages where I'd advocated for increased funding in Silver Creek. These were leaked this morning. Henderson's team is suggesting you've been directing company resources to benefit your fiancé's community. My stomach dropped. Binto's decisions were made long before I met Maggie. Doesn't matter how it looks, David replied, when a damage is done. Henderson has called for an emergency board vote on his acquisition offer. Says your personal entanglements have compromised your judgment. I spent the next hour calling board members, but the mood had shifted. Even my strongest supporters were wavering. Claire appeared at my door. Maggie Foster called twice. And the Henderson team sent over new acquisition terms. Tell Henderson I'll call back. And get Maggie on the line. But before Claire could leave, my phone lit up with Maggie's name. Have you seen the articles? I asked immediately. Yes. Her voice was tight. My supervisor called. They're questioning whether my relationship with you violates ethics policies since your company funds some of our projects. I closed my eyes. Maggie, I'm so sorry. Did you know? She cut in. Bennett Henderson was watching us? Was this weekend some kind of PR move? What? No. How could you think that? Because I just got off the phone with a reporter who suggested our entire relationship was orchestrated to distract from the Henderson deal. He said he had sources inside your company. The betrayal in her voice cut deeper than I expected. Maggie, listen to me. This is Henderson trying to force my hand on the merger. He's using us. Using us? Or just using me? Because from where I'm standing, your company's still intact. My credibility with the communities I serve is being destroyed. The line went dead. I tried calling back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. The board meeting was brutal. Henderson presented his case with surgical precision, highlighting the unethical concerns around my relationship with Maggie and the rural investments. When I tried to explain that the investments predated our relationship, David interrupted with emails showing I'd advocated for increased funding after meeting her. While the initial programs were legitimate, these expansions appear compromised by personal interest, he said smoothly. By meeting's end, the board had set a formal vote on Henderson's acquisition offer for the following Monday. I had 1 week to save my company, and possibly my relationship. Claire found me staring out my office window an hour later. Maggie called again. She sounded upset. I nodded numbly. And Alexa, Claire's voice softened. I've never seen you like this about anyone. Maybe the company isn't the only thing worth fighting for. I spent the night drafting alternative proposals to Henderson's acquisition, ways to save the company without sacrificing the rural development programs. By morning, I had a viable counter-proposal that protected what mattered most. But when I called Maggie again, her phone still went to voicemail. I'm going to Silver Creek, I told Claire, grabbing my coat. But the Henderson counter-proposal meeting went reschedule it, I said firmly. Some things are more important. The drive to Silver Creek took forever through an unexpected autumn storm. Rain lashed my windshield as I rehearsed what I'd say to Maggie. How I'd explain that she wasn't collateral damage in a corporate game. That what had happened between us was the most real thing in my life. By the time I reached her farmhouse, the storm had intensified to dangerous levels. Tree branches whipped in the wind, and the dirt road had turned to mud. Her truck wasn't in the driveway. I tried her cell again. Nothing. A neighbor's truck splashed past, then reversed when the driver spotted me. "You looking for Maggie Foster?" the elderly man shouted over the storm. Since she headed up to Johnson Ridge, said something about checking the irrigation system before the creek floods. My blood ran cold. Johnson Ridge, my property, sat directly in the storm's path, with the creek already swollen from earlier rainfall. Without hesitation, I turned my car toward the ridge, praying my city vehicle could handle the increasingly treacherous roads. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge as darkness fell. But all I could think about was Maggie out in this storm because of me, because she cared more about the land and the community than her own safety. Just like I once cared about more than stock prices and corporate acquisitions. Before I'd buried that part of myself in boardroom battles and doomed marriages. The question wasn't whether I could save my company anymore. It was whether I could find Maggie in time to tell her that she'd already saved me. My Audi wasn't built for rural roads during a flash flood. When the engine finally quit, I was still a mile from the ridge. I grabbed my phone, no service, and my emergency flashlight, then stepped into the storm. Rain pelted my face like tiny needles, as I trudged through mud that sucked at my designer boots. Lightning cracked overhead, briefly illuminating the flooded landscape. The wind whipped my hair across my eyes, but I pressed forward, calling Maggie's name until my voice grew hoarse. I'd abandoned a critical merger meeting for this, stumbling through darkness soaked to the skin, terrified for a woman I'd known less than 2 months. The old Alexa Johnson would call this insanity. The woman I was becoming recognized it as the only choice I could have made. A beam of light bobbed in the distance. I shouted again, forcing my exhausted voice to carry over the storm. Maggie. The light stopped, then moved toward me. Relief flooded through me as her familiar silhouette materialized from the darkness. Alexa? She sounded stunned. What are you doing here? We were both drenched, standing in ankle-deep water as the creek continued to rise around us. Looking for you, I shouted over the rain. So our neighbor said, So you drove out in this storm? Are you crazy? Yes, I admitted, rain streaming down my face. So completely crazy. I've been calling you for days. Maggie's face hardened. So you could explain how I was just part of your corporate strategy? No, so I could tell you that you're wrong. That I didn't know Henderson was watching us. That what happened between us was real, is real. A massive crack split the air as a tree branch crashed down nearby. Maggie grabbed my arm. We need shelter. The farmhouse is too far. There's an old barn just past that rise. We half ran, half stumbled through the deluge, the beam of Maggie's flashlight our only guide. By the time we reached the dilapidated structure, we were both gasping for breath. The barn interior was musty, but mercifully dry. Maggie found a lantern and matches, casting a warm glow through the space as the storm raged outside. She turned to face me, water dripping from her hair, her usually bright eyes dark with hurt. Talk, she said simply. So I did. I told her everything, about Henderson's manipulation, David's betrayal, the board's ultimatum, about how I'd walked away from the most important meeting of my career because nothing mattered if she believed I'd used her. And I've spent 15 years becoming someone I thought I needed to be, I finished, my voice raw. And then I met you, and suddenly I remembered who I actually am. Maggie's expression remained guarded. And who is that, Alexa? Someone who cares about more than quarterly reports. Who remembers why I started this company, to help communities like Silver Creek access capital without predatory terms. Someone who can fall in love without calculating the cost-benefit analysis first. Her eyes widened at my last words. A love? The word had slipped out unplanned, but I didn't take it back. Yes, love. I'm in love with you, Maggie. And it terrifies me more than losing my company. She stepped closer, her gaze searching mine. How do I know this isn't just another strategy? That tomorrow you won't go back to Reno and make a deal that destroys everything my community has built? And you don't, I admitted. But I'm asking you to trust me anyway. Maggie's hand came up to touch my cheek, her thumb wiping away water, or perhaps tears. That's a lot to ask. No. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain on the roof and our breathing. Then Maggie leaned forward and kissed me, tentatively at first, then with increasing certainty. We shed our soaked clothes slowly, creating a makeshift bed from old horse blankets. In the lantern light, Maggie's skin glowed golden as she moved above me, her touch rekindling everything I'd tried to deny about my feelings. I never wanted anyone the way I want you, I confessed as her lips traced a path down my neck, my collarbone, lower still until coherent thought became impossible. Later our limbs entangled, Maggie's head resting on my chest. The storm seemed to echo our earlier passion, wild but gradually calming. What happens now? She asked quietly. Your board votes Monday. I traced patterns on her bare shoulder, thinking, I have an idea, but it means completely reinventing my company, taking a risk bigger than any I've taken. Bigger than running into a flash flood for me? Amusement colored her voice. Different kind of risk. I smiled against her hair. That was heart. This is legacy. She propped herself up to look at me. Oh, tell me. As the storm finally began to subside, I outlined my plan, not just to save Johnson Financial from Henderson's takeover, but to transform it into something that truly aligned with its original mission. And could fail spectacularly, I admitted. Maggie's smile was gentle. Or it could change everything. When dawn broke, we emerged from the barn to find the world washed clean, the storm's destruction evident but the sky a perfect, promising blue. The boardroom fell silent as I finished presenting. 9 pairs of eyes stared back at me, some skeptical, some intrigued, one openly hostile. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat as I placed my hands flat on the polished table. Summarize. Instead of accepting Henderson's acquisition or continuing as we are, I'm proposing we restructure Johnson Financial into a dual-mission entity. Our urban division continues high-yield operations, while our rural division expands as a low-profit community development corporation. The CFO frowned. TINS reduces overall profits by nearly 18% in the first year, and increases community impact by over 200%, I countered. And tax advantages that offset roughly half the profit reduction. David finally spoke. Sinis is a radical departure from established financial industry models, all because of a personal relationship. I met his gaze steadily. Actually, it's a return to the founding principles of this company. My father established Johnson Financial to serve communities banks had abandoned. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that mission. Henderson, who'd been invited as a courtesy, stood with a tight smile. Tinnis' emotional appeal is touching, but my offer expires today. I suggest the board consider the guaranteed value for shareholders rather than this experiment. Several board members nodded. I had lost them. Then the boardroom door opened, and Maggie walked in. We'd planned this, but my heart still leaped at the sight of her, professional in a tailored suit yet unmistakably herself. Apologies for the interruption, she said calmly. I've been invited to present the community perspective. For 30 minutes, Maggie laid out data I'd never seen. The ripple effects of predatory lending in rural communities, the economic multipliers of patient capital, the untapped markets Henderson's model would abandon. What Ms. Johnson is proposing isn't just ethically sound, it's financially viable in ways traditional metrics don't capture. I've brought representatives from 5 rural communities ready to partner under this new model. The door opened again. Claire ushered in 5 people, ranchers, small business owners, community leaders, who each spoke briefly about what Johnson Financial's restructuring would mean for their towns. When they finished, the boardroom had transformed. Even the most skeptical directors were engaged, asking questions about implementation rather than objecting outright. Henderson stormed out halfway through. David followed soon after. The vote was 7-2 in favor of my plan. 1 month later, I stood on a small stage in Silver Creek's community center, officially launching Johnson Rural Development Corporation. Camera flashes popped as I cut the ribbon alongside Maggie and local officials. Once you did it, Maggie whispered as we posed for photos. We did it, I corrected. And just the money. You're the vision. Later that evening, as we walked the same bike trail where we'd first met, now repaired and expanded through our first community project, Maggie took my hand. So, CEO of a restructured financial empire. Any regrets about giving up the pure profit model? I stopped walking, turning to face her. The setting sun cast everything in gold, including Maggie's smile. Not one, I said truthfully. When a board's concerns about profit reductions were overblown anyway, early data shows we're actually expanding our customer base because of the rural initiative. Always the businesswoman. Maggie laughed, but her eyes were soft. Not always, I countered, reaching into my pocket. Sometimes I'm surprisingly impulsive. The small velvet box in my hand silenced her laughter. Her eyes widened as I opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. When we started with a fake engagement for all the wrong reasons, I said. suddenly nervous despite weeks of planning this moment. I'm hoping you'll consider a real one for all the right ones. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? Your life was so uncomplicated before me. Uncomplicated isn't the same as happy, I replied. I'd had everything I thought I wanted, and nothing I actually needed. She touched my face gently. And what do you need? You, I said simply. Every argumentative, challenging, beautiful part of you. Maggie's smile was blinding as she pulled me close. In that case, yes, although technically this will be our second engagement. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the trail where we'd crashed into each other's lives, I kissed my actual fiancé. No audience, no pretense, no agenda beyond this moment. 1 year later, to the day, we returned to that spot. This time with friends, colleagues, and Maggie's siblings gathered to witness our vows. I wore white, Maggie wore blue that matched her eyes. Claire acted as my best woman, beaming proudly as we exchanged rings. When I crashed my bike that day, I said during my vows, I was running from everything that mattered. Connection, purpose, authenticity. You didn't just help me up, you showed me a different path entirely. As sunrise painted the Nevada sky in possible colors, Maggie Foster became Maggie Johnson, and I finally understood what it meant to be truly successful, not by what I'd accumulated, but by what I'd been brave enough to risk for love.